Here I am, class. So we get the picture, right? I'm trying to get in on time, but you may see a screen that looks like that, right? Or I may be a few minutes late and you might not see anything for a few minutes. But we're getting the program here. Number one, it's relaxed. It's not too relaxed that we don't get something done, nor is it too relaxed that we aren't talking about, like, we're not really, it's like not as if we're not going into deep dives, because we're totally going into deep dives in this thing. It's just the other stuff, like what the hair looks like, or what my mouth tastes like. That's always important. That's always important. Okay, this is Dr. Annette Feravich. I am the teacher, and this is the classroom. What classroom are we in? We are in the spiritual connection classroom, or the spiritual classroom. I don't know. I needed to keep it short to fit, a certain area on my, whatever, screen, chalkboard, whatever I was doing, PowerPoint, whatever. So there we go. And maybe you noticed I've actually started getting a little bit better system, although, timing not perfect, but that's a system of things over here. Timing won't be perfect. But so I'm, doing a nice cut and paste right away with the schedule. So hopefully the schedule isn't going to change so much. Why does it look like we're not in there? Totally. Why does it look like that? I don't know why it does that. Let's see. I'm looking over there at the screen. It's delayed, and so I have to see it if it's moving down. And there we go. And it's moved down. Not enough though. Why isn't that enough? I don't know. No comprendo. All right, there we go. I just want to get that in the screen. I don't know if it shows up in the screen better later on. I think it likely does, which bothers me now because that's going to be floating way down here. Woo! Oh! Okay, all these, little pressures that we get through. How? Breathing. That's how we do it. We breathe all the way down into our diaphragm. Why? So we need the Holy Spirit in there. That's why. Hello. Okay. If you noticed, oh, you know what I think I did? I think I changed the wrong one. Hold on, let me look over here. All right, if you notice, I was about ready to start talking about the next class, but that's only because I just put something in there that I just love. I'm so happy that I did that. So there's a change on the schedule, but I'm getting back more and more things are getting systematic over here. So I'm very happy about that. With my one-man band, I'm pretty happy that it's getting systematic over here. At least a little bit. At least a lot. It is. Okay, so we are here in the spiritual classroom, and we are still talking about mirror neurons. Now, I wanted to keep that up there. We're moving into helping behavior, but as you know, I thought about changing compassion to empathy, and now I was thinking about changing mirror neurons to be more specific to what we're talking about now, which is helping behavior. But all of this has to do with mirror neurons. So if we were sort of these last few lessons talking about a thesis statement for these last few lessons. Of course, the thesis statement really is Trinity. We're still there, right? So we're still there in the Trinity. So that really has to do with the thesis statement, the necessity of the Trinity, right? And knowing the Trinity. But in that, as a refresher here, in that we are having to get to know the image and likeness of God, of course. Because why? Because we are supposed to be made in his image and become more and more like him over time. All right. So that's what we're working on. And in each piece of this, we kind of sometimes want to remind ourselves, what are we really talking to? Like, what's our thesis statement? If you're writing a paper, if you're writing a book, I've referenced this Edmund book right over here, American Slavery, American Freedom, several times. I've referenced that. And I've read you his thesis statement several times, which has to do with the fact that we all want and proclaim American dignity, human dignity, right? But yet, on the other hand, we are violating that human dignity every hour of every day, and still that is true, right? Still, that, of course, that's true, and I've been saying a lot about sex trafficking, but trafficking, don't forget, the definition of trafficking is not only for sexual purposes, it's also for work purposes as well. And that's the kind of trafficking that I'm seeing right now with all this promotion of it's yeah, I know, I'm stopping and hesitating because it is just a how about this? How about just a no kind of reflection at all for our children? How about that? How about that? It took me so long to think of what I was going to say that I forgot why I was saying it. This country is it, yes. So, human dignity, that was the reason why I was saying that, right? So, do we have any reflection at all? How much reflection at all do we have on, in particular, our children, right? And for both work purposes, I just see so much of it. I just see so much of this violation for work purposes and for sex purposes. Either fit in one or the other, or whoop, out. And that is a purposeful attack on our spirit, right? I feel like right now, if there were a battle, right? If there were a real battle, it would be for our spirits. It would be to demonstrate that there really is a God, for example, and that we're not all supposed to be in this hierarchy of worker bees. Where do you fit in the hierarchy? Let's get going, because we're owned by China now. So shut the F up. And sorry, in the spiritual classroom. Sorry, it's not the philosophical classroom. Oop. And get in line and get in line, right? And if it's simply an elimination of some brain matter, right? If who you are is simply an elimination of some brain matter, which is the argument, isn't it? Which is kind of the argument that you're a drain on society if you're not contributing. If you don't have the mental capacity to contribute, then you are a drain on society, right? So in so many ways, we're talking about this, human dignity. But for my purposes, remember, we left here talking about nature, nurture. I'm pretty sure that was, nature, nurture. We left here talking about that and the importance of nature, nurture, right? There is an importance of nature. There is. We need to have those mirror neurons. But if we can eliminate those mirror neurons at birth or whenever they come up, if we can eliminate those mirror neurons from multiplying in certain people's brains, well, and they are incapable then of empathizing with somebody else, where is God? Right? If the nature can be manipulated in such a way that we can eliminate God, then where is God? That's the experiment right now, right? That's the great experiment. I don't know how long it's been going on for. My guess is 200 years. Actually, what? 200, So 1776, 1976, what? Right? Right? 250 years, something like that. Right? I can't believe, I can't believe how time flies. So, here, a lot of philosophy here. Always the case. But, right, who has intention if they don't have the capacity? Well, maybe that's not the lesson for compassion mirror neurons, right? For that person to have it, maybe it's for somebody else to have it and grow their mirror neurons. Maybe that's what they're supposed to do. And I guarantee you, no doubt in my mind, there is no doubt in my mind that right now we are under the microscope for experimentation. There are a few people left who are believers, who are true believers. And, yeah. I'm not, there's, for me, I wouldn't say, and they're trying to eliminate us. They are, but I already know the end story, so that's not the focus. Otherwise, the focus is fear, right? The focus right now is for me and for me teaching you, especially in the spiritual classroom, is to understand, and I said this all day long, it must be my new thesis for today, is that our physical body tells us, of course we know this, we're in a spiritual classroom, hello, duh, we know this, that our physical body tells us what is going on and is connected and associated with our mental capacities and ideas and stuff, and our spiritual health as well. And we could see it's reflected. So if we look at the physical world, we could see how it could match the theoretical world and then the spiritual world. Now, that relationship going in the opposite direction, we can see how the spiritual world then is affecting our physical world as well, right? So, spiritual world can what? What are we talking about? Very specifically, especially because we're in the spiritual classroom right now, we want to see then, we likely have believers, right? Likely have believers, people are curious. So here we want to see the spiritual world moving towards the physical world where, right? If I believe in something that's spiritual, what is my big question? Where are you, God? Where are you? Where are you? So in the spiritual classroom, we are moving from a spiritual world. Where are you, God? You've said these things, to a physical world. Show me, show me, show me, show me, show me, right? And if you were in my reading room on Thursday, actually Friday, I was in the reading room on Friday, I wasn't there on Thursday. If you were in the reading room, I read readings for what people would read for the Passover. And in there, what you're seeing is you are seeing like all of the depth of people, the idiosyncrasies, the figuring of all of this out, right? So sort of this I don't know, a spiritual understanding with physical kinds of implications a little bit. All right, so let's not we're going into a deep dive that went just way too deep right there. The point here is that we want to see the spiritual world manifest itself in physical ways. Here was the thought. It was the Red Sea. And what I said about that was the Red Sea was, so we were talking about the Passover, so Moses, and then the parting of the Red Sea, and whatever, 20 days later, 30 days later, 40, it was 40 days and nights that he was up there on Mount Sinai. So maybe, but they took a while to build the calf. So let's say, 30 days later, 25 days later, they're building a golden calf. The idea of show me more. what have you got today to show me? So that's what we were talking about in the reading room. Did I call it the Reptile Room? I did, because that's the book that we're reading. But instead we read the story of Passover. Okay? So this idea of this human nature to need to see it in the physical world. The need, the strong need that we have to make a connection between the spiritual world and the physical world. And God, of course, knows that we have that need, but we don't even understand the need. We don't even understand the need, because when we see the Red Sea parted in front of our eyes, we're like, yeah, well, maybe. Today we're like, yeah, well, maybe. But not, most of us are, yeah, like, not really, didn't really happen. We don't take the Bible as being literal, right? Why not? Because those crazy things could not have happened. We don't believe in miracles. Why would God keep performing miracles like a circus performer, right, when we clearly don't believe in miracles? Or if we do, we only believe them for a minute, and then what do? We explain them away with what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry, we explain miracles away with what? I'm sorry, what was that? Begins with an S. Actually, a consonant blend, SC. We explain miracles away with what? Science. With science. We explain miracles away with science. Okay, so let's try and explain miracles with science. I happen to think the discovery of mirror neurons is so incredible. What an incredible story that we said with Giacomo Rizzoletti, right? So what an incredible miracle, if we want to see miracles, are mirror neurons. But then also, as I said, this bigger, contemplating this sort of bigger picture of, I absolutely guarantee there are scientists out there that are manipulating mirror neurons by race and by gender to see whether or not it changes, the narrative on nature versus nurture. And the roots of that always is, which I don't think I got to on Thursday, the roots of that always is in, are you a believer or not? What do you believe? What do you believe? Because the bottom line is free choice, intention, free choice, right? Well, how am I going to choose what is good in my free choice? I've got to see the benefit in it. I have to see the benefit. And mirror neurons is my ability to see the benefit in doing good, because the only way I can see it, right? I do not have my eyes on myself all day at all. So the only way that I could see the benefit of my good is to see it in somebody else. So this is, drum roll please, the beginning of our development of mirror neurons. In seeing the other person, when we're masked up, and if that's not an experiment, I don't know what is. Honest to God, if those masks are not an experiment, I don't know what is. I've never seen a more blatant but unethical experiment. Unethical, why? Why is it unethical? Because we're being experimented on and we don't know about it. We don't have any knowledge of it. This is a violation of the Nuremberg codes. This is a violation of our human rights. And these were violations of our human rights that were outcomes of experiments that were being done by the Nazis, breaking bones of those individuals who are not of the higher class, the higher echelon, a belief that we are not all created equal. So a belief that does not hold true to our Constitution, nor does it hold true to our scriptural beliefs. Because again, we know, according to scripture, the sun rises and sets on the good as well as the evil. We know. So I have no more rights to things like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Than you do, than anybody else does. They take them away from me, they'll take them away from you. That is what this country is, what we've learned, right? What we've learned by being the example for, despite that we're a republic, we say an example for democracy, an example of democracy. That's what we call it. That's what we call us. Okay, so slide 1, we slid back to our very first slide. So today I'm talking about the mechanism by which these changes occur, which is helping one another, connecting to one another. Those are, I don't know why that whole thing keeps, oh, I know why. That's why. I didn't fully have it on the screen. That's the reason why. It didn't look like it was fully on the screen. There I am moving my PowerPoints down. So we are then trying to find the mechanisms by which we get spiritual life. That would be a thesis statement, right? That would be a thesis statement. We are looking for, in this chapter 13 of our story here in our spiritual classroom, we are basically looking for the mechanism by which we create spiritual life, okay? And the mechanism by which that occurs, that we create spiritual life, is by moving things that are necessary into consciousness for debate, not things that are unnecessary. We have to use discernment. Discernment I talked about in our critical classroom, our critical thinking classroom. You know what? Actually, I think I brought it up in the Bookless classroom is what I think I did. And again, in the critical thinking classroom. I love the way my themes run through these classrooms without repeating myself. Overlap, sometimes there's a little repeat and overlap, right? But overlap, yes, but actually all different material. So if you want to take a look at that, whatever I was just saying, take a look at that in the Bookless classroom. Discernment. I think that's what it was. Okay, so how does that occur? We don't have to contemplate everything into, oblivion, dissect it into, a billion little pieces. No. Is it necessary, and to what extent? We have to decide how much effort do we put into something before we start seeing a payoff, or the payoff is worth it, right? This is a good example of what I'm doing here, right? You know I'm doing this for free. It may seem really silly to you, but then I saw that kid, which was so inspirational, who, got to his college degree at 9 years old during the pandemic. Why not? Why not show people what I can do? If I really do want to be the national teacher, why not take the initiative to show people what I can do and see if people really end up liking it? I think that you will. But the point here is that you need to also understand when to pull back. Now, I am never a believer as a spiritual person in pulling back from what God has told me is my path and my journey. I'm never a believer in that, because that requires faith. And when you're pulling back from God's journey for you, that's a lack of faith, okay? And we all have disruptions in our faith, without a doubt. I haven't seen anyone move a mountain, and apparently it only takes a mustard seed size of faith, which is the smallest seed apparently in the whole world, on the whole planet, or relative to the tree. I don't know, right? I don't know. We're going to start doing a corrections is what we're going to start doing. I have to say, you know I love you, Seth Meyer. You know I do. Okay, you know I do. So we're going to start to, I'm copying you. We're going to start doing a correction. But that's up to you because I'm telling you, you know, to take, and I say investigation. It could, I don't mind the term deep dive, but I think that deep dive has gotten a weird connotation to it or some political scrappiness about it. I don't know. But we're not calling it rabbit hole because rabbit hole, we have said a rabbit hole is to try, a rabbit hole encourages all information having the same weight. You just are just like a vacuum taking in information. And that's not what we do. As I started this whole little portion of this conversation about the overlap that I have with the Bookless classroom is discernment, is that we do have to make good judgments. And go back to the Bookless classroom if you want a little bit more in-depth explanation of what discernment is and what we mean by good judgment. We are not judging others. That's not good judgment. Good judgment is judging me, what's good for me and bad for me, which I just, so there you go. I just told you. Just told you. Okay, so in order, what is the mechanism? The mechanism by which we make the spiritual connection with the physical world is through intention. We're being judged by our intention, but we can't be lazy in the mechanism. You either choose to use the mechanism or not. You know what kept coming to my mind is Russia's Geddy Lee, who says, even though you decide not to choose, you still have made a choice, right? So you can decide here not to choose, but you still have made a choice. So you have decided what your intention is. Your intention is to ignore it, all right? That's a moral choice, right? You can choose not to decide, but you still have made a choice. Go look it up. The band's name is Rush. The singer is Geddy Lee, because I don't know, maybe they had a different lead singer. Look that up. It's probably on the, what was Rush's album? They had like the one, I was going to say. Doesn't matter what I was going to say. All right. So you still are making choices. And what is the mechanism by which we see the spiritual world in the physical world? Where do we see our miracles? What is the mechanism by which we see the spiritual world in the physical world? It is through consciousness. It's a conscious choice. It's a conscious choice. Those Israelites could have made a conscious choice to say, let's ponder that Red Sea, but they didn't. They pondered, Moses has been gone for so long. Where's our leader? We're like a bunch of, little wound up little, right? Where's Moses? Let's build a golden calf. And then we talked about the symbol for the medical community and how it went back and forth. And we talked about this in the reading room we did on Friday. Yeah, we talk more than just about reading. That is for sure. We talked about the medical symbol, and that came from Moses, if you did not know that. It came from Moses. Go check it out. It's got all kinds of mystical connotations, connections. It has all kinds of mystical connections, that symbol of the medical community, which was one snake, and then it became two snakes, and then people started dissing the two snake thing. Where'd you get that? It looks like a sex thing, whatever. And then what they do? They went back recently to the one snake. Go look up the one snake. Go look up that mystical meaning, which is in the story of Moses. It's in the story of Moses. And if you're not exactly sure, go check it out on my Friday's class or in the reading room. All right. My reading room was on Friday. Usually it's on Thursday. I was pretty stressed on Thursday. After the philosophical class I was. Yeah. Woo, woo. Okay. This gets me energized. Even though I don't even have people here, this gets me energized. So here was the very specific mechanism by which helping behavior actually provides us with physical benefits, right? So we have talked about, breathing and the physical benefit of mindful meditation and getting that deep breath all the way down into your diaphragm, which sounds a lot like I'm taking the time to get the Holy Spirit in me. The Holy Spirit, what do we think about? A spirit. Take the time to get a breath in you. It's literal, it's physical. Take the spiritual and put it into the physical world and see if you don't get the spiritual benefits from it. Deep breathing, getting that diaphragm. We already know physically you are healthier when you do that, right? What is, as a believer, what is the spirit? What is the spirit? Well, when God put the spirit into Adam, very specifically, it was his breath. So what it taking the spiritual world, what we understand from the spiritual world, and putting it and understanding it into a physical way. Now we understand God physically, right? That's what we're trying to do. Why? I don't see you. I don't feel you, right? I don't see you. I don't feel you. You're not stimulating my senses. Isn't that what we're looking for? We're looking for the spiritual God to come into our physical world, right? The spiritual God to come into our physical world. Start thinking about the things that we know spiritually in a physical way. And now I'm trying to teach you some more stuff that you might not know, like mirror neurons, right? Well, what do we know spiritually? We know if we connect with people, that's a good thing. We know that spiritually, when we connect with people, that's a good thing. All right, let's move that into the physical world. Mirror neurons. Mirror neurons. Now, what if I was doing an experiment to see whether or not, because this has always been the case. It's always been the case. This is the nature nurture thing. This is what Freud battled. We battle. I got something here, like a hair. We battle it outside with other people, and we battle it physically in ourselves. Freud battled it. Yeah, I don't remember his name. I do now. I do. It doesn't even matter. Alfred Kinsey. Alfred Kinsey is who I was talking about, and who literally has data on the sexual arousal of newborns all the way up to 18 months. How could he have that data? How could he possibly have that data? And you have to understand that we literally have institutions named after this man. We literally, and this is the reason why people hate psychologists right there. You have data on the arousal of infants all the way to 18 months. And no, I'm sorry, 18 months. I don't know why I said that. 18 months is when they started showing, I don't know, I'm not going to get it right. And why? Yeah, I had to look up the data because the data is basically not announced anywhere. The useful data is used for categorizing sexuality, right? After they had basically gotten data on sexually arousing infants. This is why I do what I do. This is why I do what I do, to destroy that kind of science. How I would call myself a scientist and a psychologist. Is it zoology? I'm sorry. Is that what it is? Zoology, not zoology. I'm sorry. If we were in the spiritual classroom, I'd probably give you the big middle finger, right? Whatever. You hack. You're a hack. You're a hack. You know why? Because you don't mind touching little kids in this hierarchy. You don't believe that there's a God. And this is why it's so important. So when I stress this idea of non-believers are asserting these positions over our words and over our ideas and over our history, right? This is a purposeful change in what we know. Somebody is trying to eliminate our ideas of God, and they are trying to see if they could do it successfully in order to create a hierarchy that works for the people on top. Who might be doing that? Who might be doing that? What an experiment. What an experiment. And the process by which they're going to do it, destroy the mirror neurons. Now we know. Now we know. Just, excuse me, sorry. Just because I had to eat right before I came on here. It was delicious too, but it was, hot sauce. Whatever. Destroy the mirror neurons. That is the thesis statement. That is the goal. All right, so let's learn a little bit more about these then. So we know we've got a physicalness to this mechanism of calming us down in order to get the physical benefits. Breathing calms our PNS, our vagus nerve gets calmed down when we breathe and take that big deep breath, right? The diaphragm is a muscle is what it is. So that muscle is learning, we're teaching it. Pull in that breath, but call it the Holy Spirit. Why not? As a believer, it is God's breath. He breathed life into Adam. So where do we get life? Well, the spirit comes from the breath. God's spirit comes from the breath. Life is in the blood. So there's Jesus right there. It's so crazy when you think about things like that. It's just so crazy. His beautiful poetic words of the word that powers that be are trying to destroy the human spirit because it doesn't benefit the powers that be. They like a system where they stay in power. And right now we're being challenged. We're being challenged, especially the vulnerable population. I think especially women and children, because there is the love. There is the love. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So that just came to me as I was saying the breath. Life is in the breath. We got life, the breath of life, but literally Scripture says life is in the blood. We know it is, and we know that it is. It's so interesting. Jesus is, the sacrificial lamb, the blood on the lamb. And by the way, how about Passover, right? The blood on the post of the lamb, who needed to be, more than just a lamb for a sacrifice. That's where the blood is. Now we're past the blood. Likely. And now we see life is in the spirit. Now we see life is in the spirit. I think. Check that out. But again, I'm going to try and do, thank you, Seth Meyers. I'm going to try and do, corrections on Friday, because I have encouraged you, right? I'm encouraging you to do your own investigation on these things. I don't always have all exactly the right answers, but especially in these last 3 classes, the critical thinking, the spiritual class, and our philosophical classroom, there's always room for thoughts, not just corrections, but thoughts. Okay, all right. So we're going to come back to our different sides of the brain again. But if you remember, the reason why we talked about this was basically do you remember the term? Regulation, exactly what we do to our economy, right? Sometimes we put money into our economy to get people to spend, approach behaviors. Sometimes we take money out or change spending regulations or criteria in order for people to save, to keep money out of the system. We regulate our behaviors the same way. We approach people, right? Or we avoid people or situations. And we do that using our left brain or our right brain, but we do that in order to make good decisions, right? And then in addition to this, we make good decisions based on what is going on in the environment right now, right? If there's a fire, I don't run into a burning building, right? And on the flip side of that, it doesn't take an extrovert to run out of a burning building, right? Might take an extrovert to run into a burning building, but it doesn't take an extrovert to run out of a burning building. That's just a smart person. That's just a person who's regulating their behaviors like they're supposed to. Approach behaviors, I need to go and solve this problem. Avoidance behaviors, get out of a burning building, right? So there are smart choices to make based on our environment, but there are also natural choices that we make based on what we learned. So here we once again have this idea of nature nurture. We have a capacity, and that capacity is God-given. The way that we understand it, our capacity is God-given. Now we have to do what the best we can do going up that pyramid, right? Going and following up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I thought that there was something that I wanted to say on this, a little bit more that I wanted to say, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, what else do I want to say? Other than the fact that we have demonstrated here neurologically that we do have mirror neurons and that they actually are activating when I see something or when I do them. And some very specific actual neurons are activating when I see someone do something or when I do it myself. Now, one of the things that I really didn't go into detail with is to really try and understand that from a more theoretical or emotional or spiritual perspective. All right. So let's start from emotional perspective, because we understand that a little bit more, right? So if I, and I did mention this before, if I see somebody cry, and I know what I felt when I cried, and remember, we can't test all of these details. You're going to have to go back to a couple of our spiritual classes a few times ago, I think number 10 and 9 and 10, so that we're talking about it. Some of the details of those studies and what we can do in those studies and what we can't do in those studies. But so now we have to go to a theoretical perspective, which is if I see somebody cry and the same neurons are firing as when I cry, then I know exactly how you're feeling. So now we are getting a demonstration, some real evidence of how this spiritual connection is a very real thing, right? You could be miles away, but this spiritual connection is a very real thing, right? You could be miles away. I could see you on Zoom and you could be miles away and you're crying and I will cry for you, right? As well, or with you as well. But I could read your story in a book. It could be a fantasy story. It could be a real story, right? An Anne Frank story, and I could read your story in a book and it would make me cry. Why? Because I know, because those and those same neurons are firing. Those same neurons. So I'm experiencing exactly what I have experienced crying and sadness to be when I've been in a situation where I lost my boyfriend, or I lost my dog, or I lost my child, or I lost my job. All of those heartbreaks are different heartbreaks. And I know exactly, I can feel exactly what that feels like. Why? Because of mirror neurons, the mechanism by which we see the spiritual world in the physical world. Okay? All right. Now, this is what I wanted to bring to your attention now, are how do these mechanisms manifest themselves in behaviors? And there are two studies here that I want to concentrate on. You can find these studies in a lot of different videos that I've done, but I've never done them I've never talked about this in our classrooms. And this is how important it is, because I talk about it a lot in my videos, and in almost every topic I can talk about, I get it in. And now this is the first time that I'm talking about this study in our classroom. So two studies. This one is the one that I almost always try and talk about, and there's a link to the information on that study. And this study is by Aknin, Aknin, and Hamilton. And there's always one other author on there, but those are the two names when you want to find out these studies. And you can see even here, we are talking about two different studies. How do I know we're talking about two different studies? Because one study is in the black bars and the other study is in the gray bars. So you can kind of see here how we do studies over time, how we build from one theory to the next. So in the very first study, we're only comparing two different groups. And in the second study, we've got 5 different groups, or 5 different conditions, you might say. What do we mean by conditions? We mean situations that we've created as a scientist is what we mean. So these false or fabricated kind of experimental conditions that we've created so that we can compare these different groups. Okay? All right, and see what we can find with the differences in the groups. And you'll see how we manipulated these different groups as we go through them. So the first study, again, is the study that was done in with only 2 different groups for comparison. So what are those 2 groups that we are comparing? We are comparing a child who shares a toy or a child who plays with a toy. All right. And so that is on our x-axis, or our horizontal axis there. All right. So those are the 2 different, we call them variables, but they're groups is what they are. They're just groups. So we've got 2 different groups there. We've got a group where a child shared a toy and a group where a child played with a toy. And then we see on the vertical axis, it is going from 3 to 6. And in fact, we have every other score between 3 and 5. So you can see there's actually there's only 2.5 point difference. Well, in our scale, in our full scale, and really you're only talking about a difference in points that amounts to about maybe 1 full point of difference. So some things that are kind of important to notice when we are measuring, because we are talking about, what are slight differences in our measure of happiness as rated by coders. All right, so let's just stop and take a minute to understand what that means there. As rated by coders. So what do they do when they're doing this scientific experiment? Let's see how it's set up so that we have a better understanding of this scientific, and it's an experiment. And it's an experiment and not a study. How do we know it's an experiment and not a study? Well, it's because we have 2 groups there that we're comparing, all right? And these groups, actually, we have children. So how do we set this up? Just so that we know. I know we're in spiritual connection. What the heck? Let's try and understand this, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to understand the spiritual world and the physical world. So let's understand how we study the spiritual world, or spiritual concepts like helping and cooperation, right? A spiritual concept. How do we study it? Because we want, again, the mechanism by which we see God in the real world. That's what it basically amounts to. How can I see God in the real world? Lucky you, we study it in psychology under the guise of being an atheist. Yeah. Anyway, all right, so we want to study kids. Why do we want to study kids? We want to study kids because the younger we get, the more we get closer to nature. Remember what we were talking about. So much of this has to do with answering the nature nurture question. Are we just machines? Are we just machines? And do we act like a machine, or do we have free choice and intention? Because that's what God wants us to do, to choose Him. That's what we're trying to do here. All right. So in this study, we want to study children and young children, and some of these we're studying really young children. It's so cool. I'm going to show you the pictures right next to that, this way. I'm going to show you the pictures right next to it, right there. All right, in a minute, those cartoon pictures. That is a fun study as well. We won't get to that till tomorrow, right? So we have these children. We want to study them as young as we possibly can, and still, if they're singing, goo goo gaga, and that's all they're saying, we just can't be like, well, tell me, what color do you see? I don't understand. And how are you feeling? What exactly does goo goo gaga mean anyway? All right, no, we can't ask that. But the younger we can study, the closer that we get to nature. Because why? Because we don't have a lot of environmental influences that have impacted that young child yet. Okay? So we get children, and then for it to be an experiment, we randomly assign them to the different groups that we have. We already see the different groups that we have right here. The two different groups are children who shared a toy or children who played with a toy. So we could just call them Group 1 and Group 2 for scientific purposes, because we're randomly assigning. We're just like, as kids come in, we pick out a number out of a basket. It says number 2, you're in Group 2. Pick out a number from basket 2, you're in Group 2. Pick out a number from basket 1, you're in Group 1. Pick out another basket 2, you're in Group 2. 1. Oh, 1. Oh, 1. Oh, 1. All right, 2. That is random assignment. Now, we don't know who these kids are, right? Each one of the kids have a number, and now each one of those kids have been randomly assigned to one of those two groups. What are the groups again? The groups are, obviously they created a scene, a situation where they would share a toy with another child. Maybe they play with a toy for a few minutes. A child enters the room. Maybe the child is sad, whatever. That child would feel better if you shared a toy. They share a toy. They created a situation that was the same for every child in the share a toy experience to encourage that child to share a toy. And then what did they measure? They measured that child's level of happiness as rated by coders. What are the coders doing? The coders are sitting there deciding how happy that child is. They have a code book, just like any other code book that tells you, what does this really mean? A smile means 5 on a happiness. Give them a score of 5, right? A frown means a 1 on happiness, or 0, whatever. 1, right? It's a frown. They're not crying, right? Okay, that's how. So there are 2 coders, and then they compare the codes, the numbers, the scores that they got for each and every child to see whether or not the scores are alike. So if I'm judging whether or not that smile was a 4 smile or a 5 smile, that somebody else is judging it a 4 or a 5 in the same way or as close. That's what coders do. So this is really, when you do science, science is magnificent. That's the reason why I'm actually, I have to say, I am not for the science behind the vaccines. Right now, I haven't seen science. I haven't seen placebos for it, and I have not seen alternative explanations for the disease studied, just like alternative explanations for the COVID virus. Alternative explanations for it means that there are alternative treatments as well. So people haven't been looking into that. And since people haven't been looking into it, it's really not good science. It's not. Where are your comparison groups? Nobody wanted to study people who were vaccinated against people who were not vaccinated for the immunity of it. Although U of M, you probably likely are studying me for that, because I opened up my big mouth and I told you that you could, didn't I? I did. And it's okay. It is okay. You're right. For me as a scientist, the end justifies the mean. I'm not dead yet. You're protecting me. I'm sorry. Is this a spiritual classroom or is this mysteries? There's just a little nibble for you, a little bait for you for my mysteries. Okay. So we've got the scientific situation planned out there, right? We've got it planned out there. We're randomly assigned to a condition where you would likely have to share a toy. And what if you were forced to share that toy? Well, happiness scale right there. How happy did it make you? That's what they're trying to look at, as rated by coders, compared to playing with a toy. And as we can see in that group, that took a long time to explain, but we can clearly see that sharing a toy as rated by coders for very young children, these are now 2, 3, 4 years old is what we're talking about. All right, capable of sharing a toy, even 18 months, capable of sharing a toy. Okay, let's take a look at those other bars that we have there. All right, we're going to take a look at and we call those are the other conditions that they created. We call them variables. They are other variables, right? Or we could call them the other groups. So in the grays, they have 5 groups that they are studying. And they are measuring just in the same way, using coders to tell how happy a child is when they meet a puppet. So now we can see here, what are they doing? They are in a situation where they're meeting a puppet. All right, how happy were they? As rated by coders. The second, and now what we do is we see the same child here is going through each one of these phases is what they're doing. So these children are not randomly assigned. This is a different design. It's designed so that the same child goes through A, B, C, D, and E. All right, so the child meets the puppet. The child receives 8 treats. That should make a child happy. But look at not happier than meeting a puppet, right? Experimenter gives a found treat to the puppet. Now the experimenter is giving a found treat, not their own treat, but a treat that was found. It was nobody. It was nobody's, and the experimenter is giving this to the puppet. Makes the child pretty happy, it looks like. But even happier is when the child gives a found treat. So the experimenter, yes, makes the child happy, but happier when the child finds a treat and then gives it to the puppet. Pretty happy there. But the happiest is when the child gives his or her own treat to the puppet. So we clearly see here that sharing something that I have, that is mine, that I might actually desire, like a treat as a kid, who is giving up a treat as a kid. And that is making that child the happiest, giving up something of my own for somebody else. And that surely is building, although we got to study them. And under this experiment, we don't know that they're being studied. You know, it is kind of funny. I did tell U of M that they could study me. I totally told U of M that they could study me. And for this reason, why not? And for this reason, to see how resilient a person of faith truly is. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and we are in the spiritual classroom. I am the teacher, and this is the classroom. Woo! We get to see the spiritual world turning into the physical world, the mechanics by which this change takes place. That's what we're learning. Thanks for joining me. I will see you tomorrow. Are we done? Is that the time? 12:31.